The king sent away the matronit from him and took the slave woman in her place. Who is this slave woman? The alien crown, whose firstborn, the Holy One, blessed be he, killed in Egypt. At first she sat behind the handmill, and now this slave woman inherited the place of her mistress. Welcome, listener. This is the Succubus Scholar, back from my busy schedule to provide you all with another video. Today we delve back into the mythology of my own patron Lilith. However, today we shall cover an area that few people seem to be aware of. Lilith, as most of you know, is a woman with many accomplishments. From the first woman to progenitor of countless demons, seducer of kings, queens and prophets, and ruler of the Sitra Ara, or hell to some. But few seem to be aware that there are passages in Jewish scripture announcing that Lilith has already managed to enter the celestial realms to become the queen of heaven and consort of God himself. Yes, listener, there were and no doubt still are those who believed Lilith had already succeeded in infiltrating paradise, and the world's woes are the result of this. But how did this come to pass? For this, listener, we must first understand another goddess, or at least an entity or principle that would evolve into a form of goddess in Kabbalistic literature. First, I should note that whilst I perused a variety of texts on this subject, I have two chief sources. Unsurprisingly to some of you, one of my main sources was Raphael Patai's Hebrew Goddess, and Nathaniel Berman's Divine and Demonic in the Poetic Mythology of the Zohar, the other side of Kabbalah. Two highly recommended texts that are sadly hard to get without breaking the bank. We shall cover Lilith's rise momentarily, but allow me to first briefly summarise the entity known as the Shekhinah, or matronit. Shekhinah is a Hebrew word meaning to settle or dwell, a word used in this language with feminine connotations. First, one must note that in the earliest scriptures, the Shekhinah is not regarded as a goddess, but as a manifestation of God that takes place when he descends to be amongst his people within the temple or tabernacle, where they worship, hence the dwelling place of God. Though it would become a term used to denote his presence wherever they gather to pray and study. While the children of Israel were still in Egypt, the Holy One, blessed be he, stipulated that he would liberate them from Egypt only in order that they build him a sanctuary, so that he can let his Shekhinah dwell among them. As soon as the tabernacle was erected, the Shekhinah descended and dwelt among them. This term Shekhinah seemed to gain favour as a solution to the prophets who claimed to have seen the face of God, when it was said to Moses that he cannot behold God and live, or that he dwelled in a single place when he is supposedly omnipresent. The principle of the Shekhinah also granted a means around the idea that there could be several entities in a strictly monotheistic religion. For instance, if he translates the verse as, "And they saw the God of Israel," from Hebrew to, "And they saw the God of Israel," in Aramaic, he is a liar, for the Holy One, blessed be he, sees but cannot be seen. If, however, he translates, "And they saw the glory of the Shekhinah of the God of Israel," he blasphemes, because he makes free, namely the glory, and Shekhinah, and God. What "and they saw the God of Israel" means is that they feasted their eyes on the splendour of the Shekhinah. Studies actually suggest that the lack of the term Shekhinah in pre-rabbinical texts may mean that this did not arise until after the First Temple era. However, even then it was very much meant to denote a manifestation of God rather than a goddess. It would not be until the rise of Kabbalah at a far later date that the Shekhinah would take on a more personal and feminine form, coalescing into the matronita or matron as the more common reference. Here, the Shekhinah is not so much a manifestation of God, but the bride of God, the king. Fulfilling perhaps the desire for a goddess form that can be found in most other religions, be it Mary, Inanna or the like, the Shekhinah would be the goddess who would descend to dwell within the temple and act as the intermediary between her beloved people of Israel and God on high. Indeed, she would fiercely protect her children and argue with her husband in their defence. The Sefer HaKalot would describe the Shekhinah's 4 camps filled with flame and chariots. If you have seen my video on Samael, you may recall how he aided his people, the people of Egypt, by giving chase along with the Pharaoh after Moses as he led his people toward the Red Sea. Well, apparently it was the Shekhinah who had been entrusted with her own force, who defended her people against Samael on the spiritual plane as they made their escape. On the Tree of Life, the Shekhinah is equated to the 10th Sephirah, Malkuth, or Kingdom. Being the sphere representing matter and governing life on our plane of reality. This should be unsurprising as the Shekhinah is the bride or manifestation of God that descends to dwell amongst his people. Dwelling within the temple, the people of Israel would supposedly have their own form of Hieros Gamos, with God the King descending to copulate with his bride within the temple, an act that would grant benefits to the world through abundance. This event would naturally be linked to the Yom Kippur, an annual event where a goat would be sacrificed to placate Samael and his people, and in turn cleanse the people of sin. As the children of Israel sinned, Samael's power would increase, and he would seek to attach himself to the matronit, to defile her. In doing so, the king would turn from her, retreating to the heavens and leaving her and her people in misery. By sacrificing the goat, however, Samael would be distracted by the offering, letting go of the matronit and thus allowing her to reunite with her husband. But, as we know, the first temple would be destroyed and sacked by Nebuchadnezzar II, and the children of Israel would once again find themselves sent into exile. As the embodiment and representative of these people, the matronit would find herself exiled with them. Robbed of her dwelling place, in which she could couple with her husband, she would find herself alone and forced to wander with her children. So it is the golden age of King Solomon and his splendourous temple would come to a tragic end through his and the people's transgressions. The people and the matronit forced to wander the lands once again. Of course, the age of the second temple would arise, but it was generally agreed to be a far cry from the first, and it is debated whether the Shekhinah ever chose to dwell there. The matronit would become forlorn and devastated by this state of affairs. The prophet Jeremiah would come into contact with the matronit in her grievous state. As I ascended the mountain to Jerusalem, I looked up and saw a woman sitting alone on the mountaintop, wearing black garments, her hair dishevelled, screaming, imploring someone to comfort her. I too screamed and asked, "Who will comfort me?" I approached her and spoke to her. I said, "If you are a woman, speak to me. If you are a spirit, be off with you." She answered, "Don't you recognise me? I am the woman who had 7 children. Their father disappeared. Before I was able to cry over him, I was told that my house collapsed and killed my 7 sons. I do not know for whom to mourn and tear out my hair." I responded, "You are no worse than Mother Zion, who was reduced to grazing land for the beasts of the field." She said, "I am your Mother Zion. I am the mother of 7. As it says, she bore 7 is forlorn." The 7 the matronit mentions is in reference to the 7 prophets who supposedly helped bring the matronit down towards earth, making the place more holy. But alas, here so the Shekhinah is dethroned, cast into exile upon the material plane. The king goes without a queen, but only for a time. Who will step in to fulfill the role the Shekhinah can no longer fill? Here enters Lilith. One day, as the companions were walking with Rabbi Shimon, he said, "I see all other peoples elevated and Israel degraded below them. What is the reason?" "Because the king has sent the matronita away from him and put the bondwoman in her place. As it is written, for 3 things the earth is disquieted, for a slave when he becomes king, and a bondwoman who supplants her mistress." Rabbi Shimon wept and continued, "A king without a matronita is not called a king. A king who cleaves to the bondwoman of the queen, where is his honour? And a voice is destined to bear good tidings to the matronita. Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout, O daughter of Jerusalem. For thy king cometh unto thee. He is righteous, and has been saved." In other words, the righteous one will himself be saved. For he was riding until now in a place that was not his, an alien place, and was suckling it. And for this reason it is written, lowly, and riding upon an ass. He was initially lowly and riding upon an ass, as we have established. These are the lower crowns of the nations, whose firstborn Kudjaberiku killed in Egypt, as it is written, and all the firstborn of beasts. But now that they will couple as one, a Tzaddik has been saved, for he is no longer sitting on the other side. And what had he lost? He had lost the matronita, and had cleaved to that other place that is called the bondwoman. This is the key passage that has sparked the debate as to whether Lilith is currently acting as consort to God himself. It should be noted here that Lilith is not stated by name, the new consort only being labelled as the bondswoman or slave girl in other translations. There are those that claim it is not Lilith, but a lesser form of the matronit, just as the matronit is Malkuth, and the lesser form of the supernal mother, or Bina, on the Kabbalistic tree of life. So the bondswoman was originally a servant of the matronit, and is but a lesser form of her. But there are signs in this passage that it is Lilith who now holds the throne as consort of God. The passage here reads that the king currently rides upon an ass, a creature frequently used as a metaphor for demons of the infernal realms. The lower crowns are mentioned here. In other translations, the bondswoman is revealed as the alien crown, queen of the other place. Crowns are often used to refer to the Sephira, the alien crown being those of the Clipper, and the other place being the Sitra Ara, or realm of Lilith and Samael. Perhaps an even bigger clue is mention of this bondswoman's firstborn being slain in Egypt. It has been established that the people of Israel viewed Egypt as a land of sorcery and the domain of Lilith and Samael, the killing being a reference of the Almighty sending a destroying angel to slay the firstborn and convince the Pharaoh to release them from enslavement. On top of this, with the idea of the matronit being polluted by Samael, by the people of Israel's sins, ultimately leading to their downfall, it makes sense that in turn the king has been tainted by the seductions of Lilith, Samael's feminine counterpart. Certainly there were and are many convinced that this is indeed Lilith, and that even now she smothers the divine phallus to prevent the bringing forth of potential in this reality, instead using the holy seed to bring forth her own children. A spirit of seduction, as it were, passed from Lilith the accuser over the attribute of foundation of the world. By this means the inner holy power was covered over and prevented from going from potentiality to actuality, for the power of the spiritual turban became enclosed in it, and from that time on, strange and evil bands were born, destroyers of the world above and below. With this, it is believed that Lilith now reigned beside God. redirecting his creative abilities toward her own worlds and peoples, and lessening this realm in turn. Until then, the world will diminish, the euphoric times of Solomon forever lost. However, is it really so black and white? Is it really a case of evil triumphing even in the heavenly realms, driving us toward the time of revelation? If you have seen my other videos, you will know that an in-depth look at the various scriptures pertaining to Lilith and her children are never black and white. Even Samael, king of the Cyclical and husband of Lilith, is an angel with heavenly duties in rabbinical literature. The more one studies ancient scripture on the Cyclical and its denizens, it becomes clear that they are not so much evil as they are simply other or alien. A people who compete with us for God's favour, with Samael arguing in their favour even as the Shekhinah, Raphael and Michael, and others argue for us. Again, you'll have seen in my Samael video that the Cyclical requires nourishment from the emanations just as we do, although they are more starved of it, with the emanations falling upon them but 3 times a year. See Zohar 1 34a to 35b. Could it be that instead of an end of things, the scripture pertains to a more natural cyclical process? That whilst this plane diminishes and the Succubus and Incubi flourish in this period, they in turn will eventually experience a time of drought from the presence of Him Most High, whilst the Shekhinah indeed rises once more and this plane sees abundance once again. For the letter Sadi has 2 heads which allude to the attribute of Sadiq, and these 2 holy springs. One pours forth and draws forth, from there to the Matronita, and from there upper and lower beings are blessed. And from this spring, holy angels were created, and many holy souls were created. And the second spring pours forth from the left side, of the Kudsha Bereku, and from there is the suckling of the alien woman, and the adulterous woman. And if Israel is meritorious, this spring closes, and the holy spring of the right opens. And if not, that spring opens from which draw the alien woman and the contaminated forces, who sit outside the supernal settlement, who are called others. And it is from the second spring that go forth demons, flying spirits, Lilith destroyers, and the wicked ones from the left side. Naturally, this caption pins the flourishing of the left side again on the sins of man. But the key here is to mention that there are 2 springs beneath the Holy One, or 2 brides, if you will. It conjures to my mind my research on the antediluvians when creating the video on Namar. Apparently it was custom for the Canaanites to have 2 brides, one main bride for bearing children, and a shadow bride taken for sexual gratification. However, as we know, Lamech would break this rule and father children on both, bringing forth Tubal-Cain and Namar from his shadow bride, Zillah. That would lead to disastrous consequences for the world. Perhaps this is a reflection of that in cosmic form, with the king spurning his main bride, the matronit, for his shadow bride, Lilith, the supposedly barren demon queen who is nevertheless able to use this holy seed to engender more sons and daughters. Perhaps via the wombs of her Lilitu followers like the Princess Namar or the Witch Queen Agrat. So perhaps we are not so much seeing the end of days, listeners, but are just experiencing a dip in the wheel, the chill of autumn after a fine summer that shall come again, if we can but weather the storms. Unsurprisingly, the closed-minded of religious followers point at the creation of demons by Lilith and scream, "Evil!" and see their growing numbers as the end of days. But there are just as many stories of these entities being beneficial toward us. Perhaps if we strove to better understand them and their desires, we in turn would better understand ourselves. And in time, rather than seeing an apocalyptic end times to clear away the mess, we will instead see a new world, where the children of Eve and the children of Lilith unite, and so doing are able to experience the abundance the emanations can offer together as one, rather than as competing peoples. I think I will stop here, listener. I appreciate this is rather short, alas so is my time these days. I'm also keenly aware that I'm doing the Shekhinah a terrible disservice with this video, as there is an incredible amount I could go into with respect to this criminally under-discussed figure. If you wish to learn more of the Shekhinah, I will once again highly recommend Raphael Patai's Hebrew Goddess, which also has a fantastic section on Lilith. If Donald Tyson's Liber Lilith helped me get into the occultic communication and adoration of Lilith, it is safe to say Patai's Hebrew Goddess is what helped me take a scholarly approach to learning and understanding the real Lilith, free from the naive and overly biased prattling of the majority, who think to make her a figurehead for their own agendas. So thank you for listening. I hope this helped to reveal some of the lesser known traits and mythology associated with Lilith. I do hope to do more videos more frequently in future, however, I do this out of passion and unfortunately I make no profit from doing this. Neither do I seek it, but it does mean I can only provide these when time permits. I have been wanting to provide a video on the Queen of Sheba for some time now, and hope I can get round to it. Naturally there is more on Lilith I would love to cover. Indeed, I would like to branch out to more modern interpretations of her, such as in George MacDonald's work or Rossetti's art pieces. I am also very tempted to do a chapter-by-chapter analysis of Tyson's Liber Lilith, revealing the ancient Gnostic works it pulls from. I hope to do all these things, but who knows, que sera sera, listener. It is as my patron wills. Whatever the future holds, I am just glad I managed to impart some of this lesser-known knowledge to yourselves, to keep the guttering flames so close to being smothered alight, so to speak. It's also a comfort to see from some of these amazing comments that there are indeed those of you who are like me, who wish to discover and learn the real Lilith and her children as portrayed in history, rather than the watered-down version so many try to sell today. But I feel myself starting to ramble again, so I will stop. Again, thank you all so much for listening. I hope you got something from this, and may Lilith grant you pleasant dreams.